Carrie LaFleur, I'm the town manager, and I'm happy to welcome you to our first Sustainability Roundtable. I just wanted to make some opening comments, and then I'm going to turn it over to Eric for the presentation. I wanted to say, I know I'm not alone feeling some level of worry every time we have an extreme weather event or a news report. Sometimes it feels hard to not feel overwhelmed by the enormity of the challenges that we face. However, we know Concordians don't typically shy away from a good challenge. Concordians take their passion, experience, expertise, and apply it to tackle the most complicated of community challenges, not the least of which is the climate crisis. Concord has a long history of taking action on climate challenge, and while we have made positive progress, we all know that there is so much more to be done to continue these efforts. And we know the key to advancing these goals is the continued integration of sustainability across all sectors of town operations. Successful integration requires collaboration, and efforts like the Roundtable are an effective and proven method to harness the collective expertise and perspective of boards, committees, community members, and town staff. The Housing Roundtable was established to bring the efforts of the various housing-related boards together to collaborate on housing. Meeting regularly allows housing advocates to brainstorm, share ideas, and leverage individual resources towards a collective goal of increasing housing in a coordinated way. I see the Sustainability Roundtable operating in much the same way. Sustainability is a team effort, relying on being strategic in the approach to applying sustainable principles towards mobility, energy, the built environment, natural resources, preparedness, while also considering equity. As I look around the room and to our remote audience participants, I see that we have representation from town leadership, staff, committees, boards, and many others representing each of these different aspects of our community. Each of you brings something to this effort that can make a positive difference, in addition to bringing your own priorities and perspectives. Moving outside of our individual silos will make a huge impact on how we address the climate challenges before us. I'd be remiss if I didn't take the opportunity to highlight a couple of recent successes. In May, the Concord Free Public Library achieved the Sustainable Library designation through the Sustainable Library Certification Program. Concord is the first library in Massachusetts to receive this designation. This achievement was made possible through a holistic, long-term planning effort led by the library staff's Green Team, and serves as an example not only to the Concord community, but across the Commonwealth. The Concord Municipal Light Plant recently announced that in 2023, it had achieved a long-standing goal of providing 100% carbon-free electric power 7 years ahead of schedule. Congratulations to both of these operations for their continued leadership in the sustainability arena. In closing, I note that the Sustainability Roundtable is an opportunity again to learn from initiatives like these and from one another to help offset future costs and risks associated with the impact of climate change and to maintain the quality of life and health in our community. Your effort is a worthwhile and necessary investment, and through our collective commitment, I know that we have positioned this community to make a difference. Thank you.
Hey, thanks, Carrie. Just going to try to switch my screen here. Sorry, I'm trying to work Zoom here along with this presentation. It's a battle of it's a battle of what they're seeing on Zoom versus what we're seeing in here. So, oops. Let me jump back. Sorry. Oh, I can't get to the tab. I can't seem to get to it.
Get back to the last view, there was a switch windows button.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to do is get back to the last view. But I feel like it's being masked by all these menus right now.
Do you have to open up video to get share screen?
I don't know, it's just being blocked by this bar. Oh, let me cross that out. There we go. Try this again. Okay, there we go. Apologies for that. Welcome everyone. Thank you, Carrie, for kicking things off with those remarks. It always reminds me, I communicate pretty frequently with counterparts of mine in other towns in the greater Boston area. And it always reminds me how fortunate I am in my role to have such support across the town for sustainability in general, and especially from town leadership, which isn't necessarily always the case. I feel like a lot of my counterparts spend some of their time struggling to bring the community along. And I think it's very different here, which certainly makes my job a lot more interesting and easy in a lot of regards. So I just wanted to welcome everyone. Thanks for being here tonight and being part of this. I want to take a second to talk about why it is that we're here. And this first point is sort of on a very broad scale, and I'm probably preaching to the choir in a lot of ways right now. I think everyone probably in this room and online is well aware that we are in a climate crisis, and we need to be responding to that as a community. And Concord took those first steps back in 2011 when the select board declared 4 principles of sustainability for the town. And over the last 12, 13 years since then, we've increasingly seen the impacts of climate change globally and even locally. The graph that you see here is of monthly global surface temperature increases compared to pre-industrial, and we've probably seen a lot of these types of graphs in recent years with global temperatures increasing. One thing to note here is the red line, which shows last year, which was the hottest year on record, and May 2024, which is the point there at the end, was the 12th consecutive month of record-setting temperatures. And you can also notice that that red line is above the 1.5 degrees Celsius that has often been used as a benchmark for climate change, and the need to not cross that line and go above that line. So again, just kind of pointing out that things are happening, things are intensifying in terms of climate change, and we as a community, along with all other communities, need to be responding to that. So that's an obvious reason why we're here. A little more specifically about why we're here is that with this concept of a sustainability roundtable, as Carrie alluded to, what we really want to do is start a series of continuing conversations with key stakeholders. So in my daily role, I communicate with staff, departments, committees, lots of different groups who have a stake in sustainability in the town, and often that's done on an individual basis. So the idea behind this roundtable is to try to bring everybody together in one place at one time periodically, just so they can be aware and hear about what's happening across the town in other areas. Oftentimes, committees have a charge. Oftentimes, they have their blinders onto that charge, as they should, getting work done. And sometimes it's good to lift your head and see how that fits in with the bigger picture, and especially with sustainability, which touches in so many different areas. Okay, so, these are just a couple of what I would consider the key stakeholders. We have lots of boards and committees who have a stake in sustainability. There's plenty of departments in town that sustainability crosses, and the staff in those departments. And then more broadly, just the town residents and other property owners in the town. I mean, obviously they're stakeholders in this as well. So again, just kind of bringing folks together periodically to do that. And even more specifically, why we're here tonight is to report out on some progress on our climate action and resilience plan. This hasn't happened in a little while, probably a little bit overdue with this for taking a look across the plan and seeing where we are. So we're excited to do that, give a little bit of a report. Within that as well, we've recently updated the greenhouse gas emissions inventory for the town, thanks to efforts, some members of the Climate Action Committee. So we'll share some results of that and what that looks like. And you know, this is all going to be fairly high level tonight, so we'll be sharing some data, but by and large, it's going to be fairly high level. I'm happy with anybody who's interested to take deeper dives into different areas if there's interest. But for the sake of time and having everyone together, it'll be pretty high level tonight. So I just wanted to take a second to remind folks of the Climate Action and Resilience Plan. And looking around, I'm sure everybody here is pretty familiar with it. Maybe haven't looked at it in a little bit. But this is really our guiding document. This was developed in 2019 and launched in 2020. In consultation with some consultants who helped put the plan together for us. And it really focuses in its largest context in two areas. And you can see those here, which is one being the town being sustainable and the other it being resilient. So in terms of it being sustainable, doing everything we can to minimize and eliminate our contributions to greenhouse gas emissions and moving away from fossil fuels. And the resilience part is how our town is preparing itself for the impacts of climate change. How do we responsibly and strategically position ourselves for the future and what we're expecting to come as part of that. Okay. So when the plan was developed, it was, I said it launched in 2020, and the idea at the time was that it would be implemented over a five-year time frame. We're year 4 right now, going into year 5. So this is an opportunity for us to look more closely at the plan in terms of progress and start to consider how we might want to revisit the plan, rewrite the plan, update the plan, looking forward as things change. There's a lot of information in the plan. The key parts of it are broken down into 5 elements, which you can see up here. There's the built environment, energy, mobility, natural resources, and preparedness. And if you do a deeper dive into the plan, you can see what some of the different levels are here. So with each of those elements, there are a number of priority actions. So, what are we doing in those areas? Blueprints for how we'll do it, who's going to actually lead the work, and the time frame for when that would be completed. So later on in the plan, there's some much more detailed blueprints that have that information. But what I'll do in a little bit is revisit these elements and some of the key priority actions that are associated with those, and take an opportunity to go through those and report on progress in each of those areas. So what I want to do now is we're going to take a little bit of time to look at a little bit of data. So the first data we're going to look at is the greenhouse gas inventory for the town. I mentioned that we've recently updated that. So Brad Hubbard-Nelson, who's the co-chair of the Climate Action Committee and was one of the two members who worked on updating the plan, is going to take a few minutes to sort of walk us through the inventory and what that looks like. And then following that, I'll share a little bit of information that's more specific to our municipal energy use. So with that, I'll invite Brad.
Thanks, Eric, and thanks for putting this together. So the Climate Action Committee was formed last year. It's we combined 2 committees. There are too many committees, and they had overlapping missions. So we got started again last year working on the Climate Action Plan. This is just a global perspective of where we are. CO2 is still increasing. I would love to see that curve turn around in my lifetime, as we all would. Now this average temperature here in Concord is hotter than Eric showed, because we live on land in the Northern Hemisphere. So we're actually above 2 degrees Celsius change. And because we live in a kind of a hot spot there, but I don't want to get in this. That's the most depressing slide of the talk. In the United States, taking one step back, emissions are going down. And so these are emissions of greenhouse gases. CO2, of course, is the big one, green, methane, nitrous oxide, and then some others. And when you add those up, you get CO2 equivalent warming. And since 2005, when the peak was for the United States, it's been reduced by 17%. That's a nice thing. That's retiring coal plants, energy efficiency, more modern technology. This includes all sources, by the way, many of which we don't track. So 16 tons a person is your average United States emissions, where the average world emissions is more like 4 or 5 tons, much lower. I'm supposed to hit return, enter. Okay, there we go. So in Concord, emissions are falling faster. We've been working at this for a while. And these are emissions that we can track from energy use and waste. There's like scope 1 and 2 and 3 emissions. It can get technical, and we'll be releasing a write-up that details a lot of this stuff. You can really sink into it. MAPC produces an analysis tool. It's a big spreadsheet that does this calculation according to this global protocol for cities. So even though it's detailed, it's as accurate as we can do, but it's comparable to what other towns do and our previous inventories. And since 2008, our emissions have fallen by almost 38%, which is twice the national average. That's a nice thing. We want to be in front. And this graph, the blue line is our emissions falling. Now we started around almost 250,000 tons of CO2 equivalent. Now we're around closing in on 150,000 tons. That's a lot. But that's split between buildings, which are the light blue bars, transportation, a lot of it's in vehicles in the green bars, and then waste is a pretty small part. Yeah.
Next, can you pause 1 second? So that was some Zoom issues. I was going to try to see if I could.
Are we not sharing? No,
Oh, we are sharing, but they're not seeing the slides advance. I'm not sure why.
okay, is that? Are they seeing any slides?
No, they're not seeing the slides advance.
Maybe we're sharing the wrong screen. Why don't we undo the share? Or share, yeah.
Entire screen.
So this is that screen there. I think it's this screen too is what I want to share. That would do it. Did that do it? Can you check whether they whether that's working? People on Zoom can't see the slides. Oh, that's, find out if they can see that. If anybody out there can see it, can you raise your hand? Okay, I think they're seeing the slides. No, Keith raised his hand. I trust Keith.
Jan's saying.
No, Jan can't see it. Damn it. Darn it.
All right. So apologies for the technical.
So-
It's saying it's sharing, so I'm not sure.
I say I'm sharing, so let's see. Stop sharing? Start sharing. Share. How many times have we done this? Let's see, does that work better? Okay, I see some thumbs up there. Okay, let me hit back here. They can see it. Sorry, you have to imagine what the previous slides were. So if you break down into a pie chart, we can all get the pie chart and look at the biggest slices. The biggest slice is residential buildings, homes. Second biggest slice is commercial buildings. A small slice for municipal buildings, a big slice for residential transportation, and then a bunch of other slices, and you can read them. Municipal buildings, vehicles, stuff like that. And then I'm not going to show much data. This is one of the last data slides. But among buildings, residential buildings mostly, it's mostly natural gas. In fact, the electricity is only that thin sliver, and that's because CMLP we were 96% non-emitting power in 2022, according to Brian. And that's a great thing. That's the low-hanging fruit. Fairly easy to do. We just had to buy it. And so that lowered emissions all around. That's why we're doing as well as we are. And in fact, CMLP has a lot of credit in this whole presentation in terms of the work that Jan, Laura, coaches are doing on various aspects of this. Now, among gas is difficult because it's not it's inexpensive fuel. So our gas use has actually gone up a bit since 2005. It's not temperature corrected, so it's gone up a little bit, but it's going to be hard to drive it down. But that's that is one of the goals. This is just saying the same thing, that how quickly we went from from fully emitting power to non-emitting power in 2023. And it's also less expensive than the power in any of the towns right adjacent to us because it's our own utility. And it's more reliable than any of those towns. So that's a pretty good thing in terms of electrification. And also, you see more electric vehicles and hybrids on the road all the time. They're going up quite fast. That's a difference. Fossil one is on the left scale. It's going down, and those other vehicles are going up. That's a substantial change and market-driven change, but it's also promoted by our being able to charge your car, stuff like that we have some influence over. And there are barriers to that we need to keep addressing there. Heat pump installations are an important part of this, and we can't quantify it exactly, but you see more and more installations by year that CMLP can track through their rebate programs and through permits and stuff. A little bit of history, with CSEC, we started working on heat pumps with a Tufts University class back in 2014 or 2015, an interest group. We had a Heat Smart program in 2018. We formed a Heat Smart Alliance combining 40 different towns now after that program. And now then CMLP launched a coaching program. We found out that coaching, helping people through this transition, is very important because it's complicated, expensive. You want to do the right thing. And we have a couple of coaches back there that you should talk to at the end if you haven't already. And then, and last year we ran some green home tours. I hope we do that again in the fall. We're going to, you have to talk to Cheryl to schedule that. Okay, in the commercial sector, we haven't done as much. However, there are some good things happening. Umbrella Center for the Arts got fully electrified a bunch of years ago. West Concord Union Church a couple of months ago, fully electrified. Middlesex School doing a big geothermal project, and another one coming soon. So there are things happening. These don't sound like commercial, but these are all count as commercial. And in the municipal buildings, of course, we are looking forward to a new middle school that'll be fossil-free. That was supposed to make it cost a lot more, but it turns out it costs a little bit more. And it's going to be something we're very proud of when it's done. Concord Free Public Library has a plan to be zero emissions by 2030. That's coming up pretty soon. So that's cool. So here's the last slide of this presentation. We're making pretty good progress thanks to emission-free electricity and efforts of many people over a while. But we're starting the effort. We're not at the end of the plan because we have a long way to go. We're a little below the yellow line. These points here are the Article 31 of town meeting. We voted to improve or strengthen our emission reduction targets. So this says to get to 2030, we just have to lower emissions a little bit more, but that's going to be difficult because now we're working on more and more houses. We're getting beyond early adopters. We're trying to normalize heat pumps, EVs, and other things to help people, use less. So CAC, which Janet Miller and I are co-chairing this year, we have a bunch of things in mind that we're going to be working on, and Jerry's on the committee as well, and Cheryl is on the committee. We're going to have a lot of fun. We work with Eric on reporting and planning and other efforts, and complement what CMLP does wherever we can, collaborating with other committees and departments. Help the town planning for resilience and adaptation. Now, I didn't talk about that. One of the guys on the committee is a real expert at that, Paul Kirshen. That's a long-term play. I mean, it's going to be expensive, but it's very important because whatever we do, we have to deal with what's coming. And then investigating some other sustainable developments, including continuing on with solar PV and to help CMLP and the town plan on that. I'm interested in thinking about this network geothermal thing, and that might be a good solution for commercial and residential in places. And other things, campaigns to help people, as this is about people. Thanks, that's what I had to say. Any questions? Dean.
You said the national average for, oh, sorry. You said the national average for carbon emissions is something like 16 tons. I'm sorry, is it on? Is that on? Yes. There you go. You said the national average for carbon emissions is about 16 tons.
Yeah.
What's the Concord average for a Concord resident?
So I can only tell you that from the part that we track is between 8 and 9 tons. But that doesn't include the food we eat, it doesn't include the stuff we buy, the houses we build and stuff. We can say that new houses get built, at least for the time being, are at least going to be electrically run. But it's anybody's guess. You could write a PhD on that, I'm sure.
Thank you.
Okay, well, thanks, Brad. Appreciate that. Just want to again thank Brad and the Climate Action Committee for helping us to update that inventory. The town has used the inventory tool from the Metropolitan Area Planning Council for the last few times. So we'll continue to use that. We'll probably be planning to update the inventory maybe every 2 years, assuming that it's not really necessary to do every single year. But that should give us a good path to work with and good data to work with. And again, I want to apologize to the folks online for the early technical difficulties. Hopefully we're past that at this point. So what I want to do now is take a little bit closer look at our municipal energy use. So in 2013, Concord was designated as a green community with the state, which means that we have to meet certain criteria in terms of our attempts to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and implement sustainable policies within our community, which makes us eligible for pursuing funds through the Green Communities Program, which the town has managed to secure in the past and will continue to pursue in the future. So each year, as part of being a green community, we need to report our municipal energy use through the MEI, the Mass Energy Insight reporting platform. So we collect data about all the energy use across town, the municipal energy use from buildings and vehicles, and that gets reported, and then we can go into the system and we can look across years and manipulate data and, help inform ourselves about our use in the town and where we can look for opportunities to reduce that. So I'm just going to share a couple quick graphs to give a sense of where we are with our municipal energy use. So this is our annual energy usage by fuel type, starting in 2011 and going across to 2023. So what you can see over time is the good news is we're gradually reducing our energy use and have been. You can see from the different fuel types that varies a little bit from year to year. We're still using more natural gas than we'd like to be using as a town. That has been reduced over time, though. So our total energy use in fiscal year 23, and this is all done in fiscal year because that's how the reporting system works. So our total energy use in FY23 was 19.5% lower than our FY11 baseline. So we're making good progress there. And in FY23, our municipal buildings have a 20% decrease in energy use compared to the baseline, and our vehicles have a 14.5% decrease in energy use. So the good news is we're making progress as a community from a municipal standpoint in trying to reduce all these fuel types. Apologies that the print is a little small on some of these. This is just taking a little bit closer look at energy use per buildings in the town. And the graph on the left there, the chart on the left, is the total energy use per building. And it's probably not a surprise that among the highest are the school buildings. They're big buildings. They get a lot of use, and even though they're not necessarily that old, they weren't necessarily designed as highly energy efficient buildings even 10 or 15 or 20 years ago. So that's, and among those you also see the BD Center, which is also not a surprise in terms of energy use, a lot of use there. On the right side, what you see is the per building energy use intensity. So basically that is the amount of energy per square foot being used in that building, which is a little bit different than the left. So you can see how the buildings get mixed up a little bit here. So for example, while the high school is the top energy user, if you're just looking at total energy use, once you factor in how much energy is being used per square foot, you can see that the high school drops much lower on the list. There's probably a couple things on here that might need to be investigated a little bit further. You can see that our very small information center has a very high energy use intensity, which might be a little odd. I checked in with facilities on that, and one suggestion was that when the second floor was added, that perhaps that additional square footage did not get factored into the MEI accounting system, so it might still be using the original smaller square footage compared to the energy use for the building. And the same might be true of the West Concord Fire Station, because I believe that they started conditioning the bays in there, and I'm not sure if that square footage got accounted for as well. So, there's a little bit more investigation that'll need to happen on some of these in order to understand for a few of them what the actual numbers are. I'm not sure why these aren't.
I think they can hear what's happening here, but it's what's on the stand to speak there.
I don't know why. Not sure why this keeps doing this. Let me see. All right, now I'm not sure what happened to the Zoom bar. Let's try sharing again.
Can't talk at the moment right now.
All right. It says I'm screen sharing. No. It says it's sharing.
Let me ask.
Okay. All right, well, I'm gonna. That one's up, okay. I think it should be working now. Okay, so we're gonna just go on to the next one. I think we might have that momentarily resolved. Oops. Okay, so another chart on the left here looking at our emissions per building. And if you had the total energy use right next to this one, you would see that they mirror each other fairly well, not surprisingly. The more energy you use in a building, you would probably expect more emissions, assuming you're using fossil fuels there. So again, we see a lot of the school buildings and the BD Center up there at the top, not surprisingly. And then, notably some other buildings like Planning and Land Management and Knox Trail, which have been electrified, we see much further down on the list. And then this on the right is just the previous year's emissions by subcategory. So the way that they break things down in the MEI system, they sort of tend to lump things together, but it just gives some sense of where those emissions are. So a few little glitches. So for example, the Ripley School building is lumped into administration, which covers most of the other municipal buildings. Indoor recreation includes BD. And then you can see vehicles here. So obviously, the use of town vehicles and the fuel from those vehicles is, up there on the higher end of emissions for the town.
One of the things about that per building total emissions, it seems as though electricity is a driver. But here in Concord, we are claiming that our emissions are non-emitting. So wouldn't this, for each building, if you took the blue bar out because it's not counted, all that stuff would peel back to just the orange? Is that true, or is this just because we're using a state tool that makes a general assertion about what the mix is for electricity, and we have a better mix?
Yeah, I believe you're right. And Brad and I were just talking about that the other day as we were looking at this data. And given the fact that through CMLP we have moved to carbon-free emissions, that's obviously something that needs to be looked at. And we'll go back into the system, and I can work with those folks to see if we can't, factor in, over the past number of years how that has changed. And, we'll take a look at how that changes this. But yeah, you're right that I would imagine that if it is carbon-free, for emissions, if it's carbon-free electricity, then those blue bars should go away. Okay, so at this point, what I wanted to do was take a few minutes to go back to the Climate Action Plan, touch on a couple of those key elements, and within each of these, be able just to provide some progress updates on some of these priority actions. So what you see here, this is for the built environment, which is one of the key elements. At the top there is the goal, as stated in the Climate Action Plan for the built environment. And then the bullets that you see here are what are considered the priority actions underneath that. And I'll apologize in advance. As I talk about progress and mention specific things, there's probably a good chance that I may inadvertently omit some things, so I would sort of welcome folks to remind me of that as we go along. So for the built environment, we've actually made a lot of progress recently in this, both in terms of well, largely in terms of policy. So as many of you know, the town has adopted building codes over the last year or two, more and more efficient building codes that are positioning us very well in terms of buildings, especially new buildings and major renovations, to move towards electrification and away from fossil fuels. So back in January of 2023, the updated stretch code took effect. In January of this year, the specialized stretch code took effect, which affects new construction only, and provides some pathways for new construction. One of those pathways does allow fossil fuel, but it's really designed to discourage that and to encourage electrification for new construction. And then on top of that, as you've probably all heard over and over again, we are in the fossil fuel-free building demonstration program, one of 10 towns in Massachusetts, which means that for new construction and major renovations, that fossil fuels will be prohibited. There will not be a pathway to use fossil fuels. So by policy, we are really taking some very progressive steps towards our buildings and electrification of our buildings. Of course, the challenge is existing buildings and working on those and trying to retrofit those as much as we can and move those towards electrification to hit that target as well. There's been progress. CMLP offers incentives and coaching, as Brad mentioned earlier, for electrification of heating and cooling and appliances. So there's some great resources through the light plant to help people be able to do that, from financial incentives to technical assistance. Brad mentioned our green home tours that some have been done in the past. We just revived that and had a great experience with that a few months ago, and we're looking forward to doing those more. So showcase a few homes in town so people can come in, go through those homes, see how other people have electrified their homes, ask questions, hear about the challenges, hear about the successes. We're about to embark on doing investment grade energy audits for all of our municipal buildings. So now that Russ Carlstad, our new facilities director, is in place after a hiatus, we're working on that so that we can look across all our buildings, municipal buildings, and look at opportunities for electrification. And that'll help us figure out where to do capital planning and invest in the future for that. Brad also mentioned already that our new middle school is going to be net zero ready. So looking forward for the future of school buildings, we're in a great position with that. As far as opportunities for waste diversion, we've had good success with our program for the town food waste composting. Our 2 locations get a lot of use from the town. I probably get more communication and inquiries from the public about our food composting than almost anything else. So from the standpoint of reducing greenhouse gas emissions, it's probably very small, but there is a lot of interest in it in terms of that being an action that the town takes. So we're also looking at opportunities to further expand waste diversion and food composting, looking at other models for how to do that on a broader scale townwide. And then something else I've been trying to learn a little bit more about are building performance standards. So you see this in Boston and in Cambridge, and other communities are beginning to explore building performance standards, which set standards for buildings in the community, and expectations that they move towards certain standards for improving their efficiency or held accountable for that. So it's kind of another policy tool that's being used and starting to be used more. So it's certainly something we'll keep an eye on. And it's challenging, as Brad alluded to, with commercial buildings in town, to often get them to motivate to increase their efficiency, go green, move away from fossil fuels. So we need carrots and sticks to make this happen. I think that's mostly it for buildings. So like I said, from a policy standpoint, we're doing really well, I think, in terms of setting up future action for buildings in the town. For energy, also making really good progress on energy. We've already talked a couple times about the light plant getting us to 100% carbon-free electricity, 6 years ahead of schedule. 2030 was our target date for that. So that's really exciting. If you think about all of our electrification efforts, if we have carbon-free electricity, then all those electrification efforts are truly carbon-free. So you're not buying an EV, charging it at home, and knowing that natural gas is generating that electricity somewhere else. We know that we're actually carbon-free when we're doing these kind of things. The light plant has also done work, the light plant and the light board, with redesigning rates. So just last month, Light Board voted to implement a new electric rate called REC 1 that allows property owners with solar to sell their RECs to CMLP in exchange for a deduction of $9 a month on their bill, so they get a credit. And so this provides continuing monetary support to those who have invested in building out more renewable generation, and for those whose SREC entitlements, so money they were previously getting, that program has ended for people, and so this gives them a little bit of an additional incentive, and helps to lower the cost of renewable energy generation. So as far as rates go, things happening with that. Also, the CMLP's planned switch to go from the tiered rate to a time of use rate is going to promote peak load management and electrification. So the tiered rate was designed to promote energy conservation, but in reality, that doesn't always work so well, and actually can sort of discourage beneficial electrification. So moving to time of use rate, I think is going to be a really good thing for the town. As far as promoting renewable energy, there are solar incentives that CMLP offers for businesses and homeowners to encourage them to invest in renewable energy in their properties, and that complements the REC 1 rate that I just mentioned, as well as the net metering rate that CMLP offers. So a lot of positive things happening with redesigning rates with an eye towards the future. The Solar Task Force. Over the last year, the Solar Task Force for the town developed a plan for additional municipal solar. We have a goal of 20 megawatts by 2030. And so, the task force just submitted a report to the select board, as was their charge, for identifying opportunities for additional municipal solar. One of the areas that they recommended was over at the old landfill, where there's currently an array over there, which is a power purchase agreement. And so the light plant has been working on a feasibility study, getting a feasibility study done to add additional solar there, and sort of weighing different options there about whether it's something the light plant would want to put in an array and own it, or is there an opportunity to expand with the current PPA agreement over there for additional solar. So the work that the Solar Task Force did, right now we're having discussions about what that means for moving that forward with trying to potentially take a project to town meeting for next year to add an additional solar project. So that's on the radar, and we'll hopefully make that happen. And then energy storage. Obviously, there's going to be storage over at the middle school with the new middle school with the array that's over there. And I'm sure most of you recall from town meeting that there was authorization for the light plant to take on debt to add utility scale battery storage onto the grid, which is something that the light plant has been looking at for a while in terms of their strategic plan, and now we're actually going to be moving forward with that, which is really exciting. So lots happening with energy. So mobility and transportation, as Brad showed in some of his slides, there's been a lot of progress with electric vehicle adoption here in Concord. That's accelerating. A lot of that has happened as a result of residents purchasing EVs. We are currently, unless the data has changed very recently, Concord currently has the second highest EV adoption rate in the state. I think second only to Lexington, and only by a little bit. So right now, I think about 8.5% of the vehicles registered in Concord are either fully electric or plug-in electric hybrids. So, we've seen that, I believe it's about over 1,200 vehicles right now. And we've seen that accelerate just over the last few years, almost doubling. So it's been really encouraging to see that. CMLP, along with Energy New England and sustainability and others, have been hosting EV showcase events to get folks to be able to go out, see electric vehicles. So we've had some events where dealers have been invited and residents who own EVs have been invited, so people can come, sit in EVs, test drive EVs, ask questions about EVs, learn about incentives for EVs. So there's definitely things happening through CMLP, as well as through CMLP, there are incentives for EV purchases, for charging infrastructure, and for off-peak charging credits. So a lot of carrots here, working towards increasing EV adoption. Also working on increasing public charging across the town. We have the new level 3 chargers over at Rideout Park that just came online at the very end of December. So we've been seeing those get used and are looking for additional opportunities for public charging across the town. The town, a few years ago, did a municipal fleet electrification study and charging study. So we're working on moving that forward with electrifying the town fleet. Each year, we're adding additional EVs. Right now, there's work in progress to add additional charging over at Public Works to accommodate more EVs in the town fleet. So public safety, CMLP, Public Works, and others are all, replacing vehicles, especially light-duty vehicles, with electric vehicles wherever possible. And more recently, there's been more incentives are being offered now for municipalities to try to replace mid-duty and heavy-duty vehicles with electric vehicles. So we're keeping an eye on that and opportunities for that as well. Of course, there's some challenges that go along with that, but it's encouraging to see that there's more incentives available for that. There's always a lot of questions around, as far as municipal vehicles, around electrifying our school bus fleet. Obviously, we have 3 electric school buses now and are interested in pursuing more of those and electrifying that fleet. There's financial considerations that come along with that. And so, we're continuing to work with the schools to look for opportunities to expand our electric school bus fleet and the charging infrastructure that we need to go along with that. And as far as mobility in general, the town is currently working on a comprehensive transportation plan through the planning department and engineering over at Public Works to take a look at transportation across the town. So motorized and non-motorized transportation and how the town can plan looking forward to improve our transportation and transportation options. Natural resources. So water conservation efforts, obviously it's summertime and those are always at the forefront. And Public Works continues to promote water conservation efforts. That certainly connects to overall to resilience for the town as well, which I'll mention in a minute or two. But obviously important with our water resources. Probably remember a few years ago that a sustainable landscaping handbook was created for the town, so that's a resource, and we certainly encourage that, and have talked about adding some additional workshops to revisit that topic and remind people about landscaping, sustainable landscaping. And then there's a lot of conversations too around trees in Concord, and what do those mean in terms of sustainability and resilience. So a few years back, there was a municipal tree survey was done. Probably could use an update on that and do that again. So we're looking into the possibility of that, as well as putting together sort of a master forest management plan for the town and looking at opportunities for that. It's and this fits in with resilience as well. Again, which I'll talk about in a second. It's great to have so much tree cover in town for a lot of reasons, but those resources are going to be under increasing stress as climate changes as well. So what does that mean? So looking forward at that. And then finally, preparedness. And this is where the vulnerabilities come in for the town and looking forward. So how can we best prepare for anticipated climate change and the impacts of climate change? So right now, Public Works has made some really good strides on a number of these items. So last year, work began with a consultant on developing an integrated water resource management plan. So how can we take drinking water, stormwater, wastewater, and manage those all in a more comprehensive way, more effectively? And this is something that, Alan's given a lot of thought to and is working towards making progress on. Related to that is the stormwater regulations and a stormwater utility. There's also been progress on that, if you remember from town meeting, that there was authorization for a stormwater enterprise fund. So trying to move forward on that as something that we could check the box on here in the climate action plan and for the town as well. And it sort of in the broader picture here in terms of vulnerabilities, the Climate Action Committee has expressed an interest in seeing what we can do to do a climate vulnerability assessment for the town and make some progress on that. So we really need to look comprehensively at the vulnerabilities for the town. So we have a hazard mitigation plan, which looks at sort of natural hazard threats. But typically that looks at things from a historical framework and historical data. A climate vulnerability assessment would factor in climate projections and climate change and look more broadly at threats across the board. It's a pretty big undertaking, an expensive one to do it, a comprehensive one, so we'll probably have to maybe bite off pieces of that. So right now the committee and I are exploring what some potential scopes might be to pursue some funding through the Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Program and look for opportunities for that moving forward. So just looking forward in general, these are what I see as a few areas we'll be focusing on among many. But mitigation, how can the town continue to reduce its greenhouse gas emissions and fossil fuel use? So as Brad pointed out in some of the data that he shared and some of the municipal data that you saw, buildings and vehicles and transportation are really the biggest sources of emissions for the town. So if we want to make big dents in that, those are the two particular areas that we need to continue to focus on and try to make headway on in order to meet our greenhouse gas emission goals, reduction goals. Adaptation, just across the board, increasing our efforts to continue to build resilience in the town to our impacts through town operations and infrastructure, how we go about development and the policies that we implement. And included in that is social resilience. So one of the things we'll be looking at this fall through the MVP program is starting a 2-year process, which is called MVP 2.0, which asks towns to develop a plan for social resilience within their town. So how do you build social resilience to go along with all of the challenges that we see with vulnerabilities? So that's something that we'll be looking at, and it's going to be something that we're going to be required to do anyway in order to still be eligible for action grants through that program in the future. And one thing I've been thinking about a lot lately is, strategically, how can we continue to integrate sustainability into capital planning with the town across the board, across all departments. I think we're trying to do a good job of that. And I think it's working. I was excited last year when Carrie sent out the notice to all staff about budget planning, and very prominent in that was that everybody across the board really needs to be looking at their budget through a sustainability lens and a DEI lens. So the message is there. What I want to look for is more opportunities for me in my role to better coordinate with departments as they do their planning, if nothing else for awareness for me, so that I can then look for opportunities to bring additional resources to help us meet our sustainability goals as they go about their planning. And then funding, looking for continued opportunities for funding through sustainability. So how can we strategically pursue federal and state grant funding, to support all the actions within our climate plan? There's been, a lot of attention given to increased federal funding over the last year. And there has been. That continues to be a little bit challenging for Concord to directly pursue a lot of those opportunities. We're a small town. We're a fairly affluent town. Many of these federal opportunities are focused on environmental justice communities, lower performing school districts, things like that, which make it a little bit challenging. So I've been trying to explore collaborations with other towns and looking for ways that we can still pursue federal funding. But we are starting to see some of that trickle down. So some of the federal dollars have trickled down to the states, and then those in turn are now beginning to trickle down to the community level. So for example, there's the EECGB program, which looks at energy efficiency. The first round of that was given out as block grants, which we did not qualify for. But now there's a competitive process that's opening up that is trickling down through the state. So we're going to be looking at that as an upcoming opportunity to see if we can secure some funds for Concord for some sustainability initiatives. So with that, I'm going to pause. I just wanted to make sure I took an opportunity to thank everybody, a lot of you included in this room and online, for all your efforts. As I mentioned earlier, it's really great to be in this role here in Concord because there's so much support across the board for sustainability and for what I do in my role. And so that in some ways makes it a lot easier to have that support and to know that staff and boards and committees are all also working towards this as they have their own priorities and charges in mind. So I certainly appreciate that and everybody being willing to talk to me about that and to have me call them and reach out to them with questions or sharing grant opportunities or asking all sorts of stuff and their patience with that. So I certainly appreciate that. So what I want to do now is just pause for questions, comments related to anything that we've covered here. It seems like we have we have a good number of staff and probably some representatives from boards and committees. I kind of wanted to maybe give them an opportunity to ask some questions first before considering moving on to the general public. So with that, I'll pause and I'm happy to take questions about anything or comments.
Thank you, Eric and Brad, for the information. It's great to hear the progress that we've made, and it's great to hear that we still have people committed to moving ahead. Are you? Okay. And I'm particularly pleased to see that sustainability is a priority when you're putting together the town capital plan. So that makes me happy. My question actually is, I'm jumping to the resident section now because my question is actually coming from a resident perspective. When I saw the pie chart that said that it's the residences and the commercial buildings and the vehicles that are the biggest areas for emissions, and I see that in the resident section, we're working on, we've got coaches, we've got the stretch code to make sure that new buildings will be electric, we've got tours to help residents. But I live in a condominium community, which has multiple units, and I don't know how many multiple unit dwellings there are in Concord, but there are quite a few. So I'm wondering, do you have any programs or what thought have you given to help those communities? Because there are other challenges besides just one homeowner having to be convinced. So what are your thoughts about that? Because I think you could make real progress there. You could get a lot more done within, if one condo community were to switch, you'd get a big benefit. So have you given any thought to that?
Yeah, I have, and I've had some conversations. I've actually had conversations with some of the board members from Concord Green on some topics like this. And I don't know that I have any immediate answers or solutions, but it's certainly something that's on our radar for addressing that. Related to that, for EVs and EV charging, we have a sustainability fellow who's working with us this summer, and one of the things that they're going to be looking at is sort of EV charging challenges for multi-unit and multifamily dwellings. And, how can we, as a town, hopefully, look at strategies for better addressing that? I mean, by and large, most people who have an EV in Concord can plug in at home, but not everybody. But I think that speaks to your question and your larger challenges, which is for, buildings and vehicles, is how can we better address, those segments of the community who, are living in those types of situations. So yeah, it's definitely on the radar. It's something we're aware of and would like to make more progress on. I think there's certain challenges that go along with those. Like, I know that just electric service, for example, over on Concord Green, and how do we address that? And I don't know is the answer at the moment, but I'd like to work to find out. How can we be better with that?
Thank you.
So.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Question.
Okay, Keith, I think you're unmuted, and unfortunately, I may be the only one to hear you, but I could translate your question.
To turn up the volume. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, Keith, so you're unmuted, so you're welcome to try to. Oh, I think we're having a hard time hearing you. That volume is up all the way.
Still nothing?
Oh, sorry, Keith, I think we're just trying to figure that out. I don't think the chat is active. We typically don't have the chat active.
It's not coming out of your laptop either. I don't hear Thank you.
I can hear. I could hear him vaguely, but it's all the way up. Okay. All right, we'll see if we can figure that out, Keith. Sorry.
So talking about capital planning and talking about sustainability, I think we have to better define that, where we really want to work toward decarbonization and electrification. I hope that people come with capital plans and say, if it's not being electrified or decarbonized, why not? Maybe the town manager and the superintendent can figure out how we could define that in capital planning. Thank you.
Thanks.
If you want to try Keith again, it should hopefully work. Because I sent the audio to.
Keith, do you want to try one more time? Oh,
Sorry, I thought that would fix it.
thought we had it.
Okay. Oh, good.
Oh, hold on a second.
Using one of the microphones.
We can't even hear it out of the laptop.
It's just not coming out of the laptop either. So, but Jason is
Jason is trying to make the
trying to help remotely here. I don't know, Jason, if you're talking right now, I can't hear you either.
Maybe Jason can hear Keith. Switch to a wired connection, which should fix it if you.
All right, we're still struggling. Well, in the meantime, as we try to maybe sort that out, I don't know if there's any more questions in the room. But to go back to your comment for a second, there's the town has an EV first policy, as you're probably aware of. So, that's a few years old, and based on my experience so far here, that's largely been ingrained in the culture within town operations is that, at any time a department is going to purchase a vehicle, they're thinking about, looking at an EV first and whether that's possible. To date, that's largely been possible for light-duty vehicles. It's been more challenging for mid and heavy-duty vehicles, but it's always a consideration. And if that can't happen, then the protocol is they have a conversation with me about why they can't use an EV for their needs, and we take it from there. But that also factors into the Green Communities program, where we have certain expectations and obligations that we're supposed to meet, targets with that as well. So, for example, currently, police cruisers are exempt from certain fuel efficiency requirements, but that is supposed to change as of FY26, and they'll need to be included too. So planning for things like that, is important and on our radar to be able to do that. So.
I think I have the next one. Alan, if I might. Can you speak a little bit to where personal practices, household practices fit in? I see that composting is about the only initiative we're mentioning that doesn't require an investment. And there was a time decades ago when personal practices would have been part of this conversation. What do we do in our homes? What do we do in our classrooms? And it seems notably absent right now.
Yeah, and I don't know, Brad, you look like you might want to answer that. I mean, we do, so maybe I'll mention this and you can run with it, Brad, but I was going to mention Cooler Concord as one tool.
Yeah, so we want to encourage the, good personal behaviors. Eating lower on the food chain, things like that. We can't enforce it. We can't even really incentivize it. But we can also help with, and the CMLP does, I believe, with incentives on induction cooking and stuff. We can't necessarily convince you to buy less Amazon or something, but we could bring it up.
Yeah, but I do think that's an important part of any community is having resources that are available to the residents to inform their decisions. We just recently had the climate festival over at the high school, and in part events like that are designed to engage the community and make them aware of information that can again help inform their choices on many different levels.
Yeah, Eric, hi, Alan Cathcart, Director of Public Works. Just to talk about the fleet electrification and the challenge of some of the larger, heavier equipment, I am pleased to say that we've just gone out and got pricing for our solid waste recycling curbside collection program, and part of that initiative was to entice Waste Management to provide a electric vehicle as part of their fleet. So, and it's going to be a pilot for them. So it's kind of exciting that Concord can sort of see real time, at their investment and their interest, because obviously we talk about local, but, impact of that could be much, beyond Concord, but to be involved with that would be kind of fun, and we'll keep you posted. So that's sort of building on the interest of the town, the support for these sorts of initiatives, and when we can do something creative, we will.
Okay, so Keith, we're going to try you one more time, but I did get your email with your question, so if we can't hear you, I'll just repeat your question. But if you want to unmute and try one more time. Sorry, still not working.
Okay, all right.
Jesus, poor Keith.
And then if we do this one more time. All right, try one more time.
Okay, so I can.
Yeah, we just have to hold it up to the, we're doing old school. I'll hold it up to the laptop. Go ahead.
Oh, hi, Keith Bergman, can you hear me? Yes. Yes, right, Chair of the Concord Municipal Affordable Housing Trust. We're very interested in the implementation of the fossil fuel-free bylaw. So first question is the version of the bylaw that was passed in January 2023 in effect now? I believe it was going to take effect on June 22nd. And secondly, when will the bylaw approved by the April 2024 annual town town meeting take effect? Thanks.
Thanks, Keith. Glad we could finally hear you. The answer to your first question is yes. The version of the bylaw that was passed in January of last year is now effective. It was effective as of June 22nd, or I guess, midnight of between the 21st and 22nd. So yes, that currently is in effect. So I can't really say too much yet about how that's going. It's only been a few days. But I will be checking in with the building department soon. I regularly have conversations with them about that. But they didn't seem too concerned about that going into effect, and they had, notified stakeholders that was going to be happening. And then regarding your second question, I do believe that the clerk's office had submitted the bylaw amendments that passed at town meeting this year to the state AG's office. So I think we're just waiting to hear back from them about approval for that. So hopefully that answered your question. And then I guess I also reminded me of something I was just talking to some folks about today, which is I just found out that the Concord Housing Authority got a $1.3 million grant to do heat pumps at Everett Gardens and Everett Extension. It was through the state program, and I'm not going to remember the name right now. Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities. I'm going to be really surprised if I got that right. So I had reached out to Jennifer over there just to start to learn a little bit more about what's involved in that grant and what the scope is, and if necessary, connect them with CMLP and any of their resources if necessary to help facilitate that. But that was really encouraging that projects like that we can continue to see happen. And Brad had mentioned a few of the the other projects in town of some of our houses of worship and other places who are taking on these bigger projects with looking to electrify and decarbonize. Maybe one last. Okay. Last question or two. I know we're going to get kicked out of the library in a minute. So. Go ahead. It's okay.
I think we can stay longer. Now, my question is, I've noticed that we're now having to draw water from Nagog Pond, and the only solution seems to be to threaten people who are watering at the wrong time with fines. Is there any way to be more persuadable on that?
I will defer to Alan on that. So is that, yeah, that's on.
So I think the question is, how can we educate the community and push with respect to water conservation, primarily with outdoor watering? I've been doing this for 38 years. It's not easy. We talk about, education, what can they do for being responsible when it comes to just energy use. You're in your home. People care about their property. We know that. We are presently looking at our rate structure to see if there's some other mechanism rather than what you call sort of the threat of fines and penalties. We have 5,500 customers. We can't be water police for 5,500 different accounts. So we are looking at some of the meter technology, and I'm sort of taking a mental note when we talk about the electric rates being a time of use. And there may be a way of doing it where it's not just it's more specific to a day of week or something like that. So we're exploring that. But it's a challenge. It's not just for Concord, but for Concord, we have to recognize property, a lot of value. Part of the property is the aesthetics. People live in this community for the environment. And so it takes education, but it's going to be something we have to, we continue to work on.
Thanks.
Hi, Kim Slack. Thank you very much for a very heartwarming and positive story about progress we've been making. I know this is a really complex issue and something that is probably probably much easier to delay as we've been doing, but we have a number of city departments in flood zones that are vulnerable if we had a big storm, in particular emergency services, the fire and police. Where does that stand? I mean, I know there's a lot of awareness about that, but, and I know it's extremely complex, but is there any movement on that?
Yeah, so I think in a broad sense, I'll refer back to my comments about the climate vulnerability assessment that we're hoping to start to make progress on, because I think one of the key topics within that assessment and key focus areas would be flooding, because that's, you know, a huge risk here in Concord. You know, it's not a matter of if we're going to get a serious flood at some point because of climate change, it's just when. So, you know, so from a vulnerability standpoint and sustainability standpoint, that is very high on the list in terms of looking town-wide at those risks. I don't know if Carrie or anybody else wants to more specifically address the buildings. I know there's been, you know, work lately within the town manager's office at looking at, you know, our buildings and building use and building replacements and things like that, but I'll let you chime in.
Yeah, so as I was thinking of how to respond, I think that the good things working in our favor is that, and also Public Works, I'm not sure if you mentioned Public Works, but both Public Safety and Public Works, they're old, outdated, outmoded facilities, and they're on sites that are too small to accommodate current needs. So we have a lot of things working in our favor on top of the fact that they're in flood zones to get those to better situated areas. I think the difficulty is the cost of relocating and identifying better sites. And that's the work that we're doing right now. I don't have specific answers for you other than to tell you that is the work that we're doing now.
Okay. And, you know, maybe that just reminded me of, you know, something else that I appreciate in this role in this town is that my position is located in the town manager's office, which is an intentional decision. In other communities, you might find my counterparts in planning or facilities or, you know, some other department. But being in the town manager's office, you know, allows me to hear a lot and talk a lot with people and know, you know, much more broadly what's happening within the community and how a lot of things relate to sustainability that I may not be aware of otherwise if I were somewhere else. So, any other questions? I don't see any. Okay, so I think we'll wrap it up. I did want to mention that, as I said in the beginning, you know, I'm hoping this is part of a continuing conversation. So my plan at the moment is to conduct a roundtable where we, you know, ask everybody to come together maybe twice a year and provide that as an opportunity. And it won't always, I'm not picturing that every time it'll be like this where there's a lot of information coming your way. Looking forward, I'd very much like it to be more interactive. So for example, maybe a department would be invited to talk in more detail about their particular efforts as it relates to the sustainability plan. So Public Works could come in and talk more about you know, the water management plan and the stormwater utility and what's happening there. But, you know, again, you know, the schools could come in or whoever it is. So we might, you know, feature them, and of course they'll be reporting from my point of view, but I'd like it to be sort of, you know, a lot more engaged. And, you know, we'll shoot for every 6 months and see how that works and adjust if necessary. So, but thank you all for participating. I appreciate it.